All right, everyone, welcome back. Critical Conversations. I'm your host, Karissa Dean, and today I am so excited. We have Morgan Lewis joining us today, and this topic is going to blow your belly. So, Morgan, will you give us a little intro about who you are?
Hello, and thank you. I love that. Instead of blow your mind, because today we are going to talk about all things gut health. I am a holistic nutrition consultant, and we will get into my history, but a longtime sufferer of GI issues, labeled with a bunch of diagnoses that I have been able to heal and fix going through my own healing journey and education to become a coach to help other women transform their gut health.
Yeah, so I'm so excited. I found Morgan through one of my private clients, Emily Ackerman, who is with Chicago Home Collective. If you're looking to buy or sell a house, Morgan, you're in Chicago as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you work with clients all over the world because tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, it was really kismet when Emily found me because we both are in Chicago, but I do work with a lot of clients. I work 100% virtual, so I have the ability to help across the US. I do not do international, but I have colleagues internationally. So if someone is listening and needs support outside of the US, we can find someone for you if you like my approach. But yes, I work with women across the US who are suffering from IBS, SIBO, GERD. I run diagnostic testing to really get to the root of what's going on with their gut issues rather than slapping a diagnosis or label on it. I do believe that symptoms are giving us data into what's really going on in our bodies, and they're telling us a lot about where we can start our healing journey. So that's been my biggest thing. And I think the biggest reason why I've been helping clients get profound results in terms of, ditching these diagnoses they once thought they had to live with forever.
Yeah, I remember I think I had just graduated college and I went and got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy because I was like, my gut was a wreck. And it was absolutely hysterical looking back because I literally sat down with the doctor for less than 5 minutes and he was like, take these probiotics, you have IBS. And I was like, okay,
Yeah,
like
that's not
that's it.
helpful.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so I'm supposed to take these probiotics and that's going to help, but like what is IBS? And so, it actually took me being a big advocate for myself to really get to the root of what IBS even meant. So, what is the most common thing that you see when you get new clients and you're working with them? Like what's the disconnect here?
Yeah, I think too, just taking a step back. So, IBS is not really a diagnosis, it's a grouping of symptoms. And when someone presents at a doctor's office, as you said, 5 minutes with the patient, they're booked back to back, they don't have a lot of time to do digging. And on the contrary, my intake calls are 60 minutes, right? Like I'm asking so much, I'm trying to unpack layers of maybe what had triggered these symptoms instead of just slapping a name on it. But with that, someone comes in, stomach pain, maybe diarrhea, constipation, heartburn, uneasy feelings, burning, whatever with GI issues. All of that can fall under the umbrella of IBS. Super easy to code it, submit it to insurance, get coverage for the visit, right? And just one step further with that colonoscopy or endoscopy situation, providers make a huge monetary kickback for running those tests. And it really upsets me. Like, you after college, a young woman going to this doctor's office, like, you probably had mild symptoms, some stomach issues that were probably lifestyle, dietary, maybe something else going on. And you went through this big, intense testing with prep work, right? Like, I hate that that is the first line of defense for so many people because it's such an intense test. So, that aside, I think, a common thread that I see outside of nutrition, which we could totally go on a whole other tangent about, stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
And, people in our culture, in today's world, especially in America, it's like working yourself to the bone is a badge of honor. Lack of sleep is a badge of honor. Like all of these things have become so normalized by society that people don't even realize that it's wreaking havoc on their health. And stress has been studied time and time again. If you go on PubMed and search stress and IBS, you will see dozens, if not hundreds, of studies that connect how stress can mimic IBS symptoms.
Mhm.
And when we're so in that mode, right, of like activated, on alert, fight or flight, our body cannot relax. And then we get into this fight or flight mode where our digestion is turned off. And then we wonder why, when we're eating a salad at our desk in between meetings, getting a stressful email from our boss, why we're having diarrhea or why we're having stomach cramping, because our body can't digest and be stressed at the same time.
Interesting. I love that exact last statement. Our body can't digest and stress at the same time. Like, whoa, that is so true. And when I think about where I was at that point, obviously I'm in my senior year of college. I'm trying to graduate. I'm also moving. I'm leaving, roommates and friends. I'm moving in with my boyfriend. Like, hello, stress. Hi. Like,
Yep.
you know,
Mhm.
trying to figure out, okay, now I'm done with school. Now I have to be like an adult and like have a full time career. Like, what does that even look like?
Mhm.
You mentioned as well badge of honor, and I think that this is a beautiful segue because I don't think people talk about this enough. And one of the things I learned, you know, many years after this experience is it takes getting really honest and vulnerable. And I think that that's something that we don't always do when we only have 5 minutes with the doctor. It's really hard to be like vulnerable and like want to share all these symptoms or all these things. So if we take off these badges of honor, how are we able to connect with what we really need? I mean, how does vulnerability play into it when you think about your clients?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And no one's ever actually phrased it that way to me. And I think it's pretty profound being vulnerable. I think first and foremost, just surface level, right? Being able to share trauma or things that have happened in one's life. I mean, that definitely shapes our nervous system and how our body responds, regardless if we're even aware. A great book is The Body Keeps the Score. If people are familiar with that, it's just profound, all the ways that trauma can affect our physiological being and subconscious rewiring. I think on top of that, you almost have to go through a sense of like calling yourself out when you are healing, because we all have limiting beliefs and we all have, these subconscious ideas of who we are, who we're supposed to be. And especially too, when you're sick for so long, it's very easy to identify with being sick, or you're supposed to be this way, or, you're just that anxious person, or you're just that neurotic friend, or you're the crazy girl and you're the one who's always sick and blah, blah, blah. And it's like our body listens to that. And for so long with myself as well, I got this diagnosis of chronic Lyme. And, I would say, I have Lyme, I have Lyme, I have chronic Lyme. And it's like every time I kept identifying with it, I was unable to break up with that to really find true healing. And so I think vulnerability is such a big piece of being like, hey, maybe that's not serving you. And maybe we need to do it a different way, and then make space for someone who can guide you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, The Body Keeps the Score is a great book. Oprah also co-authored a book called What Happened to You, and I think that it's so, the older I get, obviously the more I'm learning and growing and evolving. But I think that when we start to get curious about why am I having diarrhea? Like, why do I have heartburn all the time? Why am I always fatigued? you know, we start to learn where our body is holding on to trauma and certain things. And it sounds like you have this really dynamic, holistic approach, because I've never heard somebody in your do what you do talk about limiting beliefs. And I freaking love it. And it makes me so excited to send people to you, because it's so true. I remember early on in my coaching career, I was hosting a retreat and there was a woman there who just would not like stop talking about her adult ADHD. Like she just like that was like she just plastered it everywhere. It was like, oh, so and so with adult ADHD. Like it was part of her name tag, right? It was this badge of honor. And I remember, like, in a private one-on-one that I had with her, I was like, hey, what if you just stopped saying, I it's because of my adult ADHD, or I have adult ADHD. Like, what if you were just you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're compounding, and it's so true. You're compounding your disease every time that you're speaking about it, or like or blaming it, right? Like in your case, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, because I have Lyme.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
so,
Well, thank you for saying that. And I think too, like, it becomes a scapegoat, right? Because it's like you can just put everything onto that, right? Like, I can't work out today because I have Lyme, or I can't do this because I have Lyme. And it's like, yeah, you do have some limitations, but if you don't have that mental block before you even start, who knows what you can actually do? And maybe you can run on the treadmill more than you thought because you're breaking up with this self-limiting belief before you even got to the starting point.
yeah, exactly. And I love that. And that is the transformation, is just realizing. And I think, as somebody who, I've been around a lot of people with cancer, and the ones who ultimately overcome have a very different mindset than those who don't, or those who just suffer longer than others.
Mhm.
It's around the way that you look at it. So how much of the mindset matters when you're working with your clients?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say it's probably 100%. Like I started actually shifting my business model because I realized when I would book someone as a package before meeting them, I never knew what their mindset was before entering this work. And I never sugarcoat what I do. Like I tell people, this is hard work. You're going to have to give up things you love. You're going to have to change things about your life. It doesn't mean that, you might not add them back later, or you might realize that they're not serving you altogether. And it's a really long road of self-discovery. And I started doing intake calls outside of my 7 month package, like just a 1 hour call, because A, I want to make sure they feel comfortable with me, they can vibe with me. And B, I want to see what their level of commitment is. And I even have questions like on a scale of 10, how ready are you to make lifestyle changes? How ready are you to invest in yourself? For a lot of people, like investing in themselves feels, I don't know the right word, like maybe not appropriate when it comes to their health. They feel like they should spend money in all these other facets, right? Going out to dinner, new clothes. And I would go to argue and say that giving yourself the gift of mental health and physical health is so much more profound than any other thing we could find at a store.
Yeah. I love that you brought this up, and I want to talk about this a little bit more, because I think that I run into the same thing a lot with clients. Is it really is, I don't want to, I say to people all the time, like, you have to be a 10 in your level of commitment. Otherwise, the monetary investment is going to be obsolete, because you're not going to get what you think you're going to get out of it unless you're willing to do the work. And you're exactly right. Like, this is lifestyle change, right? So when you're talking about, or when you're, doing these intakes or having these conversations, it's so interesting what people are willing to spend their money on. What would you say to somebody who's teetering that line, who is like, I want something different, but I'm afraid of making the commitment. I'm afraid of being a 10.
Yeah. I think fear is almost a good indicator of where you should put your money, right? I've heard this quote once and I don't know the exact thing, but if your dream isn't big enough, then it's not going to scare you, right? Like it should be a little scary of like, oh, I'm about to overhaul my life. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Do I trust this person? This is a lot of money. But I think, I always ask someone like, what would it mean to you if you were in the same place next year? What
Yeah.
happens if you stay how you're staying, right? Does that take away your spontaneity because you can't go out to eat because you might have a stomach flare? Or is it affecting your workout regimen because you just got home from work and you're physically exhausted and can't do anything else for the day? Are you not able to be present because you're so anxious about what to order at dinner because you don't know what's going to cause you a flare, right? Like all these things are very real and a big part of people with IBS and stomach issues, that before they come to see me because they've lost this trust with their body because for so long, they've been told, take this pill, take this, right? It's like that disconnective healing where it's an external thing that's going to solve our problems, which is rarely the case. And the second thing to that is you lose this connection with your body because you're like, oh my God, what is my body doing? I can't trust this vessel that I'm in because I just want to go and have fun. And now I'm stuck in the toilet for an hour before I go out to dinner. And now I have to cancel my plans. And I just bought this outfit and I wanted to go out and have a great night. I heard from someone that they actually like missed out on their sister's wedding because they were suffering from such bad GI issues the day of the wedding. And that just like broke my heart. Like, it just sucks, right? And it takes so much away, but there is a better answer. And that's kind of where I focus. So, a long answer.
Yeah, no, 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 that's great. And I love what you said, lost trust in your body. And I think that that is, where I would love to go in this conversation, because I think, trusting yourself starts in the gut, right? Like we all have, I mean, we've been taught as little kids, or most of us were taught, like, what does your gut say, right? You've heard that before somewhere along the line, like, trust your first instinct, right? When you're taking a test, right? The teacher's like, well, trust your first instinct. Well, that's your gut. And so what gets in the way of people not trusting their gut?
When you said that about being a kid, it's so funny because I think about this too with eating. Like at a certain point and at a certain point in time, we all were intuitive eaters, right? We all, as kids, you think kids eat so much more than they do. They eat what their stomach can handle and then they stop and then they tell you when they're hungry again. And each of us have this ability. And then somewhere along the lines, I don't know exactly, I think this is multifaceted, right? Parents, teachers, media, advertising, it gets skewed and we're taught to not trust our body. And I think that's the same with our health. And especially in today's world too, with social media, it's like this influencer is drinking this cherry mocktail and taking seed probiotic and armor colostrum. Maybe that's what I should do, right? And it's like you see all these things and it's like, oh my gosh, let's just take a step back. First of all. Second, every body is a different body, right? There is not one client that I have that is on the same protocol. Maybe they've got 3 or 4 overlapping supplements. Every single client has a different protocol, be it nutrition, protein goals, supplement and supplement dosing, and stress management techniques, because every person is coming to the table with different history, different genetics, different life experiences. And so I think we've become so accustomed to Googling answers, having people telling us what to do, having like such an immediate gratification culture that we haven't really been able to sit in that discomfort and be like, is this serving me? Or am I just doing this because I'm seeing it? It's marketing, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The quick fix. Sorry, my dog's barking. Amazon's probably dropping a package. Let's be honest.
Love that.
So yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, the quick fixes. And I think that is where, I met a lot of resistance in going to, this Western medicine doctor and being like, I'm looking to you for answers and you are so busy. You don't have time to help me understand. You have quick fixes. So tell me a little bit, like in your approach, you said you do long intakes. You really vet your people to make sure that they're all in. What's kind of that process like as far as, the first couple months of like, what are you asking of your clients in this commitment?
Great question. So after the intake call, we usually decide which testing to run. I always run a stool test, but then have options to add on depending on what's going on with that client. And this is where all this customization comes in, which is great. I have the ability to run comprehensive blood work, thyroid panels, cardiovascular markers, you name it. We can also run hormone testing, food sensitivity tests. So it's all customized, right? Depending on how severe and how long these symptoms have been going on. At that point, a lot of people will start with the same foundations because a lot of people are eating incorrectly just based on being in America and, the standard American diet, which is nicknamed SAD, which is kind of ironic.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that, but I'm like, wait,
yeah.
Oh, that is sad. Okay.
It's sad. It's such a sad nutrition plan. And, you think about our society here, and especially if you've ever been able to have the luxury of traveling to Europe or whatnot, you notice quickly everything's fresh, right? Their breakfast bars, tomatoes and olive oil and meats and cheeses and fruits, right? It's like no box, no packages, like fresh baked goods. And here's the opposite, right? It's so normal to eat a protein bar, cereal, something from a box. And so the first step is kind of unpacking that and getting this client to eat real food, maybe 80-90% of the groceries being real food, following that perimeter of the grocery store. Like if you think about it, you're walking through the produce, then you take a circle around to the meat and dairy, and then maybe you're rounding it out through the aisles to kind of get to your nuts, seeds, grains. But we're not really snaking through the aisles. We're not getting the dessert, the frozen pizzas, things like that. And of course, there's flexibility, right? Like there's always going to be 10%, 15% where you may not have the ability to choose something, but we try to do our best. And then on top of that, I would say the step 2 is blood sugar balancing, which we could talk for 3 hours about. But in short, blood sugar is a foundation for every single health aspect in your body. It is something I actually don't shut up about. I think my clients are like, Morgan, enough, because I truly geek out about this. And I can seriously trace any diagnosis or any health issue to blood sugar issues. But if you're sitting here being like, what the hell is blood sugar? Blood sugar is what happens when we eat glucose. Our body has to produce insulin. Our insulin acts as a key to unlock the cells that glucose can then get into the cells and then be utilized for fuel. Glucose, which is sugar, is our body's preferred fuel source. But some is good and more is not better, right? We need to have a balance. And so eating meals like, let's say, oatmeal for breakfast, that seems like a health food, right? But oats alone are pretty high in carbohydrate. So in order to have a blood sugar balanced meal, you'd want to put maybe a protein powder in it, or maybe mix egg whites with it, maybe put some chia seeds for some extra fiber, or a scoop of nut butter. And then you've kind of got a well-rounded meal because you've added protein, fiber, and fat to that carbohydrate. And so looking at a nutrition plan and really focusing on blood sugar balance, you would be surprised how many people come back without even doing supplements, and they just feel better, less anxious, more regulated, better sleep, better bowel movements because their body's not riding this blood sugar roller coaster that they were previously on.
Yeah, this is like that common crash that we hear about all the time. And
Mhm.
my mom's a diabetic, so I grew up and she's like not the healthiest person ever, but it's honestly like when I look at her and how we were, how we were raised, I think it was a lack of education. I don't think anyone really sat down with her to help her
Yeah.
understand. Oh, like I'm literally like, oh, oatmeal. Okay, I could add nut butter. Oh, I could add like, okay, like wow, these
Yeah.
are like some really basic skills. Like, why don't they teach this to us in school, Morgan?
It's a great question, and it's something I maybe in later life would like to focus on when I'm more established. There's a lot of money to be made if people are sick.
Yeah.
And, a lot of us mistake the health insurance and pharmaceutical industry for being in our best interest. And not to say they aren't life saving, but they're not in the business of being proactive. It's more reactive, right? You've got this diagnosis, here's this drug. And most doctors, I was trained solely on nutrition for upwards of 2 years. Think about that, day in, day out, about nutrition and food and fuel and how to maximize and all these things. Most doctors, they're learning so much in their medical school. I think they've got one class on nutrition. I mean, that doesn't even scratch the surface. And
Yeah.
there's been so much misinformation and so much money to follow when you see these big companies on who's funding the research, right? If we think about the low fat craze, and then the fat was pulled out to add sugar and everyone thought it was super healthy. And then we've got the paleo keto team. And then we've got the Weight Watchers moderation team. It's like you can find a compelling argument probably for any food, regardless if it's actually healthy or not on the internet. And, there are definitely foods that aren't healthy. I try not to be very black and white because in reality, life is not black and white. There's a gray area. But undoubtedly, I'm not going to sit here and say candy is going to be a healthy choice
Right.
for people. But I'm sure there's some study funded by some candy company that states the obvious, right? So you've got to follow
Yeah.
the money.
Yeah, well, oh my God, I feel like we could go so many different things, so many different directions. I'm gonna jump back. One of the notes, you were talking about the SAD diet in America. We travel a lot. We have family in Europe, and we spend, three months usually in Nicaragua. I just got back from Nicaragua. You sit down to eat. You don't get things to go. It's a very different culture. And one of the hardest parts about coming and going from there is switching back and forth from like, slow down. Like, there's no drive through food, there's no drive through coffee. Like, if you want an espresso, you're going to get out of your car, you're going to sit down, and you're going to enjoy your espresso. Like, the to go thing, that quick mentality that we have in America, where it's like food needs to be fast, it doesn't exist in a lot of other cultures. Food is meant to be shared. And I think that there's a big thing, in my personal opinion, around food and community. Food is meant to be shared in community. You're meant to be in connection with other humans. And that's part of our sad American issue, I think. So first, I wanted to mention that, and I appreciate you saying that. The other comment I wanted to make, you were talking about big pharma a little bit. I mean, I think it was a year ago when I realized it's the Food and Drug Administration. Like, they're together as one. Like, hello, people. That is an issue, because what that means is the food people are stamping things so that the drug people can come in with that quick fix and stamp things. Like, that needs to be a church and state separation, in my opinion, because it's definitely not helping us. So, tell me a little bit more, there's so many directions we could go on this. What is it that you would want people to understand, though, in a 30-minute podcast? What can somebody walk away with today and be empowered in their lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I think just what you said right off the bat about food is meant to be enjoyed. Like, I don't ever want to lose that sight. And I think that is so important. Like, eating in a relaxed state can solve a lot of issues because it goes back to that nervous system regulation. And I think just from my own experience, a lot of people think they aren't stressed out when in reality they are. And kind of getting real with yourself on what's serving you and what's not. And are you overbooking yourself? Are you overcommitting? Is your default yes? Can you put up boundaries to take care of your health? Because life's never going to get less complicated or less stressful, but it's all about our internal rewiring and our internal response to the stressor, right? And I think meditation and things like tapping or mantras, those can all be very powerful when you find what resonate. And then I think too, if someone is listening and also has gut issues, right, find the right provider for you. You can absolutely start with easy swaps, like it was, as we said earlier, shopping the perimeters, ditching some of these processed foods. There's a big movement now against seed oils, which are super inflammatory. So choosing good, healthy fats like avocado, olive, coconut, fat, butter from real things, kind of ditch the seed oil, the corn, canola, soy, vegetable oil. Start there, start with some easy wins, see how you do. And then if you still have persisting symptoms, then it's time to probably address them. And for me, the holistic route was the answer, but I never want to tell someone what to do. So I understand it both ways. But if you are going to a gastro and they are slapping an IBS diagnosis, I would put a little alarm bell off and see what you can find with another person.
Well, yeah. And I think, normal isn't necessarily right. Like, what your normal is doesn't necessarily mean that you're functioning at your greatest capacity. And I think that that's something that I had to come to reality with, is I kept being like, well, this is just how it is. And it's like, but what if it can be better?
Yep. Common is not normal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people subscribe to that too, with the gut and hormone issues as well. Everyone gets that. Well, it's not really what you should have.
Yeah. There's a more optimal way of living, but it takes getting curious. So I think, one of the key takeaways that I have is people need to take time to get curious about their health and get curious around well, this, I say all the time, like that may have been the way that we've done it, but it doesn't mean the way we need to keep doing it. Like things get to
Absolutely.
change. So taking time, slowing down. I love your perimeter shopping. I literally had the visual of my grocery store, and I was like, yeah, basically, if I go to the grocery store, I'm on that outside aisle. I in the last like 2 or 3 years, I've gotten addicted to farm stands,
Well,
and then I found a local farmer, so I'm buying, chicken off of the farm. I'm buying pig off their farm, and then my
yeah,
husband's a big hunter and fisherman, so we have a ton of frozen fish and meat
that's
that's
great. Yeah.
legit from the wild. And I
I think
think
that's
that
a great tip.
yeah, well, and I think one of the things that I know you taught Emily, because you worked with her and then she worked with me, she was like reading labels. I want to talk about this really briefly because it was super impactful for her, and it's actually something I did it, but I didn't always communicate it with my daughter. And so my daughter now has actually become addicted to reading labels because I'm like, there's a lot of sugar in there. And she's like, really? And so she's starting to read labels. Tell me a little bit more about that conversation that you share with clients.
Yeah, and I think labels too, we're so trained to think of calories. And I think personally, that's the most obsolete metric of all time. I don't ever look at calories. The first thing I'm looking at is ingredients. I want to see what the heck is in the food. I want to see if I can pronounce the things. If there's things you can't pronounce, look them up on Google. We all have smartphones. There's really no excuse to be buying something and then get home and be like, what is this? Look it up when you're at the store, right? Determine if you want to put that in your body. So once you've done that, then I kind of like to look at the bottom of the label. It's got carbs, fiber, sugars, and protein, if I'm remembering correct chronological order. The thing with carbs is that you want to determine the net carbs, meaning you want to take the total carbohydrates minus the dietary fiber. That's going to give you net carbs. So, say for example, you're eating something like a chip. I always reference this brand Simple Mills. I really like their stuff. A lot of their products are made from nuts, so it has higher fiber. So their chip maybe has 18 grams of carbs and then 3 or 4 grams of fiber. So it's going to bring you down to maybe 14 or 15 net carbs. Then I'm looking at the sugar, right? We've got to take that with a grain of salt because if you're looking at something that's sweeter, it's going to have higher sugar. But we want to make sure there's no like crazy added sugars, not super high in sugar to spike our blood sugar. And then protein, right? Again, taking with a grain of salt. There's not going to be a lot of protein in chips. I think the Simple Mills might have 2 or 3 compared to like a potato that's maybe 0 or 1. Ballpark, I like to be around, if it's a packaged good, like 20 to 25 net carb per like meal or per item per se. And then just kind of going back to that blood sugar principle of like balancing. So if you're eating, let's say, a cracker, what can we add to that? Maybe you're eating that cracker with some canned tuna and some avocado as part of a healthy meal and throwing in some cucumbers to get your fiber, avocado fat, tuna protein, and then the cracker is a carbohydrate. So just kind of thinking about things in that capacity because no food is inherently bad. We just want to give our body the best ability to respond to it with appropriate glucose so we can, get fuel and feel good from it instead of getting that crash.
Oh my God, I love this so much. So I have one more question. We're going over time and I don't care. I want to know, because you've talked a lot multiple times about that whole, like I just keep seeing circles when you're talking. So you're talking about the cracker with additives. How important is it if we choose to snack or eat? How important is it to kind of look at that full circle of like a cracker with a slice of cheese or a slice of tuna or with the avocado?
There's this girl, her name is Glucose Goddess. I think her first name is Jessie. She's on Instagram. She's got great tips if you're interested in this. I think it's foundational. I think it's pretty important because if you're someone who's, waking up having right that plain bowl of oatmeal, then you're snacking on an apple, then you're eating chips alone, and then you're eating pasta for dinner, that's carb, 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 glucose, 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 blood sugar, blood sugar, blood sugar, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
we're anxious and we're not full and we want to keep snacking because we've never given our body actually something to satiate. Protein is satiating. It's, if you think about it, right? If you've got a steak and a bowl of French fries, it's much more self limiting if you're eating a steak. Rarely do we overeat meat. our body's able to kind of self-limit when we're full. But that bowl of French fries, I mean, you could keep going and going and going. And so that's the concept here, right? It's going to help you have more, I mean, definitely more portion control just inherently because you're able to self limit. You're going to feel fuller longer. And then, of course, we're not getting into nutritional science right now, but we need the micronutrients and we need the amino acids from protein and vitamins and minerals. And we're not getting that from pasta and oatmeal. Yes, there's some, but not all. So we could definitely do a part two on nutrition science and whatnot. But yes, I think it really is one of the most important things you can do for your body.
Amazing. Well, I can already say we'll definitely have you back on because I know I learned so much and it was such an enjoyable conversation. So we'll definitely have you back. So if you're listening right now, make sure you tell us what you would
Yes.
love to learn more of. Morgan, tell everyone who's still listening where they can find you.
Yes, my business name is Three Pillars Wellness. I'm at Instagram at three_pillars_wellness. I post a lot of free advice. I like to share knowledge, so you can find me there. If you follow from the podcast, shoot me a message. I'll get you my free guide. I have a website, tpwellness.org. And then I also have a Beat the Bloat self-paced course. If you are someone who's struggling with IBS, this is a pretty low cost way to ditch your IBS for good in less than 12 weeks. So we will link everything for you, but lots of resources and lots of options to work with me.
Oh my God, I love it. Morgan, thank you so much. This was an epic chat, and we'll definitely have you back.
Yes, thank you so much. Loved connecting.